I believe it can. It's really interesting. This is a conversation I have all the time with people. I've met a lot of innovative manufacturers who are doing a great job actually at competing globally. But to me, the critical aspect of being able to compete globally is making sure that you have a business environment in your home market, in your home country. In this case, we're talking about Ontario, which has historically been the center of Canadian manufacturing, making sure that the business environment there is supportive of these companies' ability to go global. And I'll give you an example. Just the other day, I met a company based out of Burlington, Ontario. This is a company that was founded back in 1951. They are food processors, and as you probably know, food and the food industry, agri-industry in general, is going to be one of those critical industries growing forward as we see China and India and Brazil and Mexico become more prosperous. The countries and the industries and the companies that are able to feed that growing middle class are going to be winners here. So Canada, of course, we have a great opportunity. We are in many ways the breadbasket of the world. We have a company called Tender Choice, based out of Burlington, Ontario. They're looking to sell their company. They process, they're processors of chicken and turkey, and they were telling me just the other day that they pay $150,000 just in energy costs here in Ontario. Now, it's not the first time I'm hearing this. They pay $150,000 and then they have to pay an HST on top of that of 13%. So you're looking at tens of thousands of dollars a month just in additional taxes. For them, when they already have to think about the US, the parity of the Canadian dollar, when they already have to compete on wages, they say to me, well, look, I could be spending that additional tax money reinvesting into my company to create the kind of, buy into innovative technologies that will lower my costs and make me more competitive so I can compete with the Brazils of the world. And instead, they've decided that they've got to go. And so they're looking to sell the company after 60 years in business. And ironically, they're getting into real estate. And one of the companies that they're looking to buy, one of the buildings they're looking to buy is a building that another manufacturer is in, and he's leaving and he's going to Mexico. So there's some real challenges right now out there for manufacturers. I think in many respects we have the human capital, we have access to a lot of things that other countries don't, but I think we need to understand that the competitive landscape has to be such that it encourages companies to want to build here and use it as a platform to export to the world. Well, I do think that we have an edge on the innovative front. I mean, I do think that China is still moving up the value chain. There's no question everyone in the world wants to get to the top of that value chain, because the higher up you get, the greater return on investment you have. I absolutely do think that we can compete, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a zero-sum game. I mean, I think a lot of this, it's about it's not one country against another. We're talking about global supply chains. And I think what's critical for Ontario and for Canada is to make sure we're part of that global supply chain and make sure that we're part of the process, which means having links with China, with India, with Mexico, wherever it is, and adding the value that we're best at adding. I don't think, my very firm conviction is trade actually creates jobs, it creates wealth. If we look what happened just after the free trade agreement with the United States, I mean, that at the end of the day was a boon for Canada. I think there's really no question anymore about that. I think if we sit back and we don't do anything, absolutely our dinner is going to be eaten. If we talk about the agro sector, for example, and agro industry, Brazil has tremendous natural resource there. They do have lower wage costs than we do, and they have the ability to feed a lot of the world. So if we just sit back and say we're not going to compete, Brazil has all the ambition to sell their product globally, and they're already, I think, the largest exporter of beef in the world. So it seems to me it's about making those partnerships so that you're growing your market, you know, that there's an opportunity for us to sell back into Brazil. There's opportunity to partner with Brazilians looking to invest in Canada and explore the market further. So for me, I see it as an opportunity. I think the companies that think that the only way to win this game is by, you know, closing the border and having Canadian companies just supply the Canadian market is that's a no-winner. I mean, we have to be very careful when we talk about industrial policy because I am a bit reluctant to pick winners. I think that individuals know better than government necessarily does in choosing winners, choosing losers. I think that on the one hand, what you do need to do is you have to create an environment where businesses have the freedom and the capacity to invest and to reinvest. So for me, actually, it comes down to having, number one, a positive tax environment where, you know, we are not competing with one hand behind our back, so that we have, in the case of the PC party, we want to bring down business taxes to 10%. I think that's really important. I think the thing that I hear a lot, and I heard it a lot when I wrote my book, is red tape is another issue. If you're spending so much of your time filling out bureaucratic forms, you really don't have time to think about global markets, because that's already another step more complex than what you're already doing in your home market. So really it's about making a government that is business friendly. And what I do here, and what I heard very often when I did research for the book, was a business and government that are at odds with each other rather than in partnership. So to me, it's about cutting a lot of needless red tape that doesn't need to be there, and making I guess, creating the understanding that business is there that government is there to partner with business and to facilitate their ability to compete and create jobs. I mean, for me, that is number one. I guess the other thing I would say, going back to the whole issue of energy, is that right now we have seen in Ontario energy rates that have really been skyrocketing. And what I hear, you know, the other day I was talking to one of the leading auto parts manufacturers in Ontario, and he says to me, I can compete with anybody in the world, but as long as I still am paying so much for energy, it really makes it difficult for me. It makes it more attractive for me to go down to Mexico when I have to pay those kinds of rates. So just to repeat, it's really about creating an environment where business wants to be. That's the future, and you're not going to stop that. I mean, you know, all it does, frankly, for me, is free up people and capital to be more innovative somewhere else. If instead of having 10 people to turn a light bulb on, you have one, then that frees up 9 other people to be creative and innovative somewhere else. Well, Canadians have, they are more cautious. They are more careful. That has served us well in terms of this financial crisis, because we have seen, in fact, that too much aggressive risk-taking, when you're not really weighing the pros and cons, can cause a great amount of damage and destruction, as we're now seeing in the United States and parts of Europe. So on the one hand, I would say that our caution has stood us well. But I think there is such a thing as a calculated risk. And I think that we have everything it takes to be doing that. And I think over time, we have started to see more and more Canadians doing that. I'm actually very optimistic that, that we are stepping out onto the global stage, and we are finding with each success that, in fact, we can really conquered global markets. And we are seeing now over time, I mean, there was a time where 90% of Canadian exports went to the United States. We're now down to about 75%. Part of that is obviously it's a reaction to what's happening to the US, but the good news is we are making it up by exporting into other and new markets. And I think that's really encouraging because you know, we've been able to rely on the U.S. for a very long time. We may not be able to for a very long time, but it seems that we've got the flexibility and the wherewithal to turn that around and move into other markets. So to me, it's good news.
So I guess the last question, and it sort of leads into this, with the current trajectory of the Canadian dollar, makes it increasingly difficult to compete.
Yes.
Any thoughts on that?
It makes it increasingly, definitely having the Canadian dollar at par is very difficult, but it is a reality. And if you think about it, well, the Americans have been competing with their dollar when their dollar was at $1 and ours was at 60 cents. Now we're at par. So it's just, there's nothing we can do about it. I would say the good news is, on the one hand, it makes it much more affordable for Canadian companies to go out and buy all kinds of innovative, capital-intensive products that will make them more productive, and hopefully that will boost our productivity numbers, which have been lagging in recent years, probably because we have been relying on our cheap dollar. So I have faith that a lot of innovative Canadian companies are going out there and investing in technology and infrastructure, and I believe that that's actually going to give us a leg up. The other good news I would say is that, you know, 10 years ago you would have heard Canadian companies saying, you got to do something about this, the government needs to intervene. I don't hear that anymore. I don't hear Canadian companies saying it's unfair, our dollar is so high, we got to do something to lower it. Actually, all I hear from Canadian companies right now is just give us a level playing field in our own country so that we can go out and compete, whether that is on a tax basis or whether that's in terms of energy costs. That's really all they're asking for, and they're raring to go and do the rest.